Good morning, and thank you, Nate, for an absolutely inspiring kind of kickoff to the day. I am totally fired up about the future of our region. How about that video? And excited to get into the programming part of the summit by being your first leader that gets to share a few lessons. My leadership lessons that I'm going to share with you today have a focus on authenticity, but maybe not the way that you would expect it. First, I want to take you back to elementary school. Lockers, cubbies, backpacks, the low pile carpeted hallways, right? Lunchrooms and recess, and fire drills. Can you remember that moment when the fire alarm first went off? First, you look at your buddies with that, is this real? Kind of wonderment. And then you kick it into gear, lining up, exiting the building, kind of grateful for a break in class. And during any school year, you likely experienced 2 or 3 fire drills, right? They came in the morning, maybe while you were sitting in the lunchroom or in the library, and as you were packing up for the day. They came at all times of the day. And why did we do fire drills? Those fire drills were preparation, creating an experience so that if you were ever faced with an actual emergency, you wouldn't panic, right? That you'd be prepared to find the nearest exit, meet up with your class at the designated spot. But my question for you is this: when was the last time you intentionally prepared for authentic leadership? Why would you, right? In our everyday lives, and at a certain stage, we become really comfortable and hopefully in touch with who we are and how we show up. Right? We go through our routines, engaged with people who are known and trusted to us. And in those moments, our authenticity is not likely challenged. But how are you preparing for when it is? I had an opportunity recently to talk to a group of OSTers about authentic leadership. It's part of a development program. Prior to that session, I asked them to share a story with me about how they had behaved unauthentically. Why would I do that, you ask? Because I found that it's simple to describe our authentic traits, but examining how and when we behave in a way that isn't congruent with those beliefs uncovers this reality that when circumstances change, a job change, a new boss, and certainly in moments of crisis like we're all experiencing right now, if we aren't practiced, keeping a hold of your authenticity is hard. So I'm going to share 3 lessons that I've learned about my own authenticity as discovered through changes in circumstances that I've had over the past few years. My first circumstance change that I want to talk about is when I was promoted from COO to CEO about 5 years ago, when our founding CEO, Dan Beam, and my mentor for 17 years retired. As part of that, we had a 5-year succession plan, right? Nobody knew the business better than me after 17 years growing up in it. Nobody was more committed to our long-term success than I was. Yet on April 1st, that first day being CEO, I woke up at 3 a.m., kind of panicked. And I did it on April 2nd, and I did it on April 3rd, because all of the families at OST were relying on me to make great decisions. The weight of that responsibility was heavy. And although I knew I was a strong leader, right? I knew unequivocally my authentic style. In that moment, I questioned. I'm a sincere, transparent, empathetic leader. I'm great at building trusted relationships, and I'm willing to be direct. Dan Beam was a gregarious leader. He loved to have fun, and he was the one with all of the crazy ideas. So all of a sudden I step into these shoes and I wondered, do I need to be fun? Do I have to come up with the crazy ideas? How do I fill those shoes? And Dan, because he was still on the board, I found myself frequently asking, what would Dan do? As I was contemplating decisions in those following months. So fast forward about 5 months in, it was September, Labor Day weekend, and I was at my parents' house in Nashville, Tennessee, and I had a tough decision to make. And the decision was related to an employee who was a little bit toxic from a cultural perspective, but was a producer for us. And I knew the decision that I needed to make, and I was on the phone sitting in Nashville. I was on the phone with one of my other board members, and she said to me, "Is this the right decision for the business?" And I said, "Yeah, but I'm not sure Dan would agree." 4 months in, 5 months into my tenure, right? And she said to me in that moment, "It's not Dan's company anymore, it's yours." And it was in that moment, like, hello, that I had and learned a really, really valuable lesson. So I went back to OST, I gathered my executive staff, and I apologized for my erratic leadership. Now, it's not exactly like the transition from player to coach, but imagine the shoes that Jim Harbaugh had coming in as the head coach and former player for Bo Schembechler. Thankfully, my role is much less visible than that of a Big Ten football coach, but the lesson is the same. Your way is the only way. My way is the only way. Jim Harbaugh is not Bo Schembechler, and Meredith Bronk is not Dan Beam. Thankfully, right? There was no way I was going to be successful if I tried to be Dan. The only way I would be successful is if I leveraged my strengths. Now, I might not be successful, even doing it my way, but the only way I had a chance was to be me. And I'm grateful that Liz reminded me of that in September. Which leads me to my second circumstance change, and that is a moment or a season of deviation. When you think about authentic leadership, it's all about building trust. So people come to expect certain behaviors from you, and when you deviate from those expectations, you erode that trust. So when it happens, and trust me, it's gonna happen, when it happens, you must own it. Own it, name it. I am normally an optimistic, open-armed, open-minded leader. I give people the benefit of the doubt, and I'm always looking for creative ways to solve problems. That's part of who I am, and that's how people know me and expect me to show up. But everybody has an off day, right? Including me. And when I'm having a day like that, I have a name for it. And anybody who's worked with me knows it. Crabby. So if somebody comes in my office on one of those days and says, "Hey, Mayor, have you got a minute?" And I say, "Of course, always, come on in, but I just want to let you know I'm a little bit crabby today." That way, they know if I'm short, if I'm closed-minded, if their interaction with me is not normal, not what they expected it to be, that I know it and they know it and we all know it. Because if I don't call it out, they might leave my office wondering, did I do something wrong? Did she not like my idea? I expected her to be more open-minded. I might not bring her my next idea, right? Because when you deviate, they know it, you know it, but they wonder if you know it. You gotta just name it and put it right out there. So that's just kind of an example of what I'll call an episodic deviation, right? Kind of a certain episode that happens. But this can be particularly tricky if you're intentionally trying to practice or evolve how your leadership shows up. I talk to some of our younger leaders about this as you're learning and growing. Often comes right after some feedback, where you learn that how you think you show up is different than how people are perceiving you. So it's not about changing your authenticity, but changing how you show up so that you can be effective. So as an example, if you're a leader who kind of thinks out loud, but you're working on listening and reflecting and kind of hanging back a little more, the first meeting where you show up and sit listening and reflecting, unless you tell everybody in that room that that's what you're working on, they're gonna wonder what's wrong, right? They're gonna be like, what's going on? Do they not like this? Do they not wanna be here? They're gonna wonder. And for me, over the course of the 5 years that I've been CEO, who I am has matured, right? It's totally changed how I show up, as it should. As it should. I'm way more engaged externally. I'm meeting with customers. I'm meeting with business partners. I'm directing the entire business. So lesson 2 is a reminder that when you deviate, either accidentally or intentionally, you have to own it in order to maintain that trust, which is so critical. All right, the final circumstance, my item number 3, is one that many of us are living through right now. When something goes wrong. I mean, things happen, right? Whether it's a months-long pandemic, the loss of a big client, or maybe just general declining performance or business changes. You have to respond as a leader in a way that's appropriate for that circumstance. Not underreact, but not overreact. And as CEOs, or as any key leader in an organization, it's natural to feel like you have to have all of the answers. If there's one thing that the past 6 months has taught me, it's that none of us can thrive alone. Each of us has stories of what we experienced as leaders during the current situation, with some similarities and some differences. Some businesses are running faster than ever. Others have closed or are seeing significant erosion. The weight clearly on your shoulders. At OST, we are absolutely privileged to be able to work from home, and that privilege is not lost on us. So on one hand, the transition was easy, but how we maintain connection and productivity in pandemic was brand new. So lesson number 3 is one that was thankfully reinforced by how we have worked over the last 6 months. That we each are at our best when we're working together as part of a team, especially in times of crisis. At OST, we've focused on 2 core themes kind of during this pandemic: connection and safety. Safety in some ways is the easy part on the physical side, masks and sanitizers. Mental safety, fear, combating that is hard. And maintaining and building new connections of our employees to each other and for us with our clients is a key theme for us. The ideas and the execution of how that happens is coming together from all over the organization. Some of the best ideas, right, are coming out. In times of crisis, everybody responds differently. It's just natural, human nature. So our job as leaders is to meet each person where they're at, which is virtually impossible to do for any single individual or even a small team, right? Especially in the current business climate. So we've created at OST some new rituals to respond to those unique needs that we have that span the entire organization. One of the things that we did, I set up a new weekly meeting with my executive team and all of the folks who report to the executive team. For a few reasons. It allows us to reinforce some of the messages and core messages to create clarity. It's an opportunity to understand the feedback from the other teams and to share the stories of how each person and each manager is responding to the unique needs of their team. This new format gives permission to the managers, which is really, really important, to give people that permission. And it allows for collaboration, which is a demonstration of lesson number 3, that we're not just talking about it, that we're living it truly as part of a team. Based on these meetings, our talent team creatively responded to new programming, not just around mental health, but also we did something interesting. We had one panel that presented to parents of school-age children about how you're gonna teach from home while trying to work from home. And likewise, and because we have this breadth of where people are at and meeting people where they're at, we also had a panel for employees who live alone and for folks who might feel isolated in this moment. The lesson here is that when you're thrown a wrench, although the decisions may be firmly on your shoulders, we are most effective when we leverage others. Not only to come to the best path forward, but as important to ensure that others are coming along. Because if they're not coming along, you're not leading. So I'm going to take you back to elementary school and ask, where are your authentic leadership fire drills? How are you making time for, practicing, preparing for those situations when your authenticity will be challenged? I encourage you to find a safe space to practice, maybe with a family member, maybe with a close group of friends. To own it when you deviate with family and friends, that's a great safe place to start. Get your leadership team together and talk about it so that when a real crisis comes, you're prepared to navigate without deviation or panic to find your group who's anxiously awaiting your arrival. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the program.